Wonderful. So today's guest is Ralf Duessel, Senior Vice President and Head of Sustainability at Evonik, one of the largest chemical companies in the world. Thank you so much, Ralf, for joining the call today.
Thanks, Christina. Great to be here.
Wonderful. Would be great, of course, we can start our podcast today with a few questions. If you can briefly introduce a bit about your role at Evonik as of now, and then, of course, we can move on to the overview of overall sustainability agenda at Evonik for today.
Yeah, happy to do so. So Evonik, as you said, is one of the leading specialty chemical companies. Roughly 30,000 employees globally, roughly 15 billion euros sales. And we really try to make a difference by delivering specialty components which enabled our customers to achieve their solutions. So you don't find us in any nearly end consumer brands directly, but we are mostly in B2B company. And I had the pleasure in the past of leading different businesses within Evonik. And since roughly 1.5 years, I'm responsible for sustainability in the company. So the responsibility to coordinate all our activities towards sustainability.
Wonderful. Can you just open up a bit more about the Evonik sustainability strategy and how it aligns with the global efforts towards net zero? If we can start with that.
Yeah, so Evonik in 2022 integrated sustainability in all their business processes, strategy, and have a joint understanding and approach. We call it Next Generation Evonik. And you see then there are three, let's say, pillars. One is the next generation technologies. That's the effort for us to reduce our footprint, so reduce our CO2 emission. Then we have next generation solutions. That's all our solutions to bring products to our customers to enable them to reduce their handprint. So in the application, I can give examples later, happy. Yeah. And then next generation culture. It's really then how do we educate, how do we upskill our workforce in this area of this new world of sustainability. So we have those three, which is integrated within the strategy of every business line and of the entire Evonik. So strategy is really the core of that.
Right. Very interesting. I think definitely technologies and solutions is something that many companies have, but the culture, this is very unique, I guess, to Evonik's.
Yeah, and it can be a broad topic. I'm not sure if we have elections coming in Germany pretty soon, in roughly 3 weeks. And we are also proud that we have activities towards democracy there, right? So that we really encourage colleagues, employees to go and vote. And I'm not sure if that's part of next generation culture, but I think it's an important initiative of the company to involve that topic.
Wonderful. Great. If we move on a bit towards maybe circular economy, or of course, the Evonik is known for some of the focus of the green energy, or rather, green chemistry. How do you balance the need for innovative products with the challenges of reducing the environmental impact?
That's a good question. I can also talk about green electricity, but let's focus on green chemistry. So last year we had roughly 12% of bio-based raw materials. And that's already an increased share. It's still only 12%, nevertheless. And it goes across a lot of business where we use it. And we want to increase that share in the future. And here then you have several challenges. One challenge is really the availability of raw materials. Here we work with suppliers. Here we try to build new value streams and supply chain streams. On the other hand, you have the customer and then willingness to pay and interest in raw materials which are green. And here we see so I would say, demand or willingness to pay at least our additional costs. So it's a balance somehow. We do pilots. So we have then materials, we call them Terra. It's the end of the product name, brand name, and then offer it to customers and see how the demand develops. In certain areas, we see some demand increase. In certain areas, we don't. And I probably, the closer we are to the end customer, like in care solutions, which is for detergents, for skincare, there we see a certain willingness to pay our additional cost. And there we have probably also the most activities in that area. And then at the end, it's not only green, it's of course also traceable, that we know exactly where the material is coming from, how it was produced, and we keep track of it. So, and one great example here on that entire green is our so-called rhamnolipids, which are biosurfactants, which you find in detergent, in cleansing, shampoos, for example. And that's 100% bio-based and 100% biodegradable. And it's also produced in a fermenter. And it's also softer on the skin. So it has a lot of advantages. And we're happy here to, in the beginning, work with Unilever to bring this to a larger scale. And now we are even further scaling this up. And you see there, we really have additional benefits besides just being green or bio-based raw materials.
That's very interesting example. And maybe just to understand a bit, was there any push from the customers, or was it the co-creation experience that you facilitated with the customers?
Now, in that specific case, it was co-creation and over years, I have to admit, right? So it's not nothing you do in a short time period, right? Pilot plan, testing, and it was really a nice joint effort. And I think when you get a certain commitment also of the customer, that helped in that specific case. So, and that's often then a discussion, right? It's a certain risk for all, right? It's for the customer, for us. How do we share that risk? And we have a lot of different examples where we also see some nice development.
Great. Wonderful, Ralf. You also mentioned, of course, about the green electricity. So I would like to also move towards that, the renewable energy and the carbon neutrality. So can you just open up a bit more on the how Evonik is decarbonizing the energy intensive processes? What has been some of the efforts in that area?
Yeah, happy to. So we have roughly 24 million tons CO2 emission. And roughly 13 million tons of that is scope 3, so all raw materials.
Yeah.
Scope 3, raw materials mainly, so coming to us. And then we have roughly 5 million tons scope 1, 2, and roughly 6 million tons end of life. So that's typical chemical industry, I would say. We are fitting in there with scope 3, then 80% raw materials. But you're asking about scope 1, 2. We started a project in 2021 to look at 20 of our sites, most important sites. They make roughly 80% of our scope 1, 2 emissions. And we analyzed how much do we need to spend, what are technologies we can implement to reduce our CO2. So we have a clear roadmap for each site and production plant. We estimated the cost, and then we came up with under this project named EAGER we have internally, and we committed to spend 700 million euros until 2030 to reduce our CO2 by 1.1 million tons by measures of more efficiency, I would say, heat integration, better yields, and therefore then we committed also to SBTi, which is validated. So we want to reduce in scope 1, 2 by 25% from 2021 to 2030. And as you said, green electricity is of interest here. We we committed ourselves by 2030 we have 100% globally green electricity for our own usage. So, and last year we had 30% globally already, and we have already PPAs lined up with Vattenfall or NBW to increase that share over the next period.
Yeah. Great. But indeed, the also scope-free emission is definitely interesting for many companies, especially working with the suppliers. And has there been any great examples? And maybe if we can open both on the examples of great practices and a bit of the challenges that internally maybe Evonik faced on how do we improve the, let's say, or reduce the scope-free emissions. That's typically, of course, the largest part. And then it's also working so closely with the suppliers.
Yeah, we took in the beginning, when we looked at it, all the commitments of our suppliers.
Yeah.
And see where we end up, because we get then reduced scope 3 if they reduce scope 1, 2.
Exactly.
And if you see that it's a significant reduction in scope 3 coming to us, just on their commitments, right? Just based on the commitments. We ourselves committed also via SBTi to reduce our scope 3 by 11% from 2021 to 2030. And we have clearly analyzed all our raw materials, CO2 coming with that raw materials, and then potential abatement cost. So how much will it cost to reduce, or what was the supplier ask for increase in cost to reduce CO2 footprint? Then we prioritize that. We are working with those suppliers. As I said, right now, it's probably a lot is pilot scale, smaller commitments, as the end market is not ready totally. But it's work in progress. On the other hand, we are also looking at new raw materials, trying to use raw materials with a lower footprint in our processes to, at the end, produce the same product or a similar effect for the customer with a different product. So that's an additional, let's say, project stream within RD&I, so our research and development area.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you, Ralf, for that. We did touch a bit about the different product lines, of course, and the sustainability solutions. But perhaps you mentioned that, of course, in the hygiene sector, it was a bit maybe easier to push this agenda also and co-create with the customers. Have there been any other examples, perhaps in other product lines and divisions, on co-creating with the customers or introduction of new product lines that are more sustainable, let's say, solutions?
Yeah, we have some examples like I can mention in product lines, also with a customer or technology partner, I would say, at the end. For example, DSM. We are producing an omega-3 fatty algae oil. So you don't need the fish oil anymore as nutrients for fish, which is really a nice example where you have a big impact on nutrition and then CO2 and all other aspects. And that's a very nice example, I would say. Another product line which also benefits from sustainability, but also helps customers. We started 10, 15 years ago a membrane business. It's a gas separation membrane business. And it allows us, for example, one big application is biogas. So you separate CO2 from methane, from a biogas plant where you just collect the waste gas, let's say, and then you get a more or less pure methane, which you can then inject into the normal natural gas pipelines, which is really also helping utilizing what otherwise would be just burned normally, or just going to the atmosphere. You can utilize it. And the CO2, which then is separated, you purify, and then you can use it as in your, how do you call that? A sparkling water, for example. I didn't want to mention any brand name of Cokes, for example. But so you really, out of biomass, you can really produce methane, and then CO2 and both is utilized, which is really a nice, I would say, effort. And it shows we have this slogan, which you sometimes can question, or, but it's leading beyond chemistry.
Yeah.
And that's a great example, because we sell membranes, total finished modules. But coming from the beginning, from the molecule, we know how to design specifically the polymer for that membrane so that it separates at the end perfectly and does this task. So those are maybe another great example is H2O2.
Mm-hmm.
We are one of the largest producer of hydrogen peroxide, which is of course a well-known product. Nevertheless, there's always new applications, and I think it's now on the rise, because when it reacts, hydrogen peroxide, it only goes into oxygen and water, but it fulfills, for example, a need in disinfection. When you need to disinfect something, you can use hydrogen peroxide, and there's nothing left. So it's a very nice and clean method to do that. So that's also a sustainable solution. Another example.
Great. I would actually, it's always very interesting to learn so many examples from different, of course, product lines. How typically this R&D process goes. So we slightly deviating from completely sustainability topic and delving a bit more into this R&D topic. How do you typically? So we talked a bit about the co-creating with the customers. Were there any other examples of ways of how those ideas and innovations are being developed internally?
Yeah. So first of all, I should say we are roughly spending 440 million euros in R&D per year, which is roughly 3%. And I have not mentioned that in the beginning. We are a member of the World Business Council of Sustainable Development, WBCSD, and they developed this so-called PSA method, Portfolio Sustainability Analysis, which we have all our products classified. There are 5 classifications: leader, driver, which have a better impact in the application and then the next best alternative. And then at the bottom, you have then challenge products, where you have, for example, toxic raw materials, which you want to eliminate as soon as possible. And we have all our R&D projects, our entire portfolio in general of our products, but also R&D projects, categorized based on that methodology, and make sure we spend most of R&D money in those areas, but also our CapEx investment in those areas where you are leader and driver, because they have normally a higher growth rate, and they have a sustainable, longer chance to win. So that's maybe to illustrate in general the framework which we are using for RD&I, but also strategy. And I was leading at one time oil additives, which is one of the 14 business lines in Evonik, as you asked for an example. And there we developed comb polymers. It's a very special designed polymer which looks like a comb, which then in the application here, specifically in engine oil, allows that the viscosity is constant over temperature. So you have way less friction, reduced energy consumption. You can show that, and you can show that then hopefully also in gears, which then it's not only combustion engines. And that's really an application which colleagues within Evonik developed over years. And then also to convince customers and showing the data. I think that in this case, we really could show the efficiency gain and then convince customers, which are big oil companies, to use these products. And it's a nice story now over years.
That's great. That's very great to hear, Ralph. Thank you so much for sharing that. Maybe just if we kind of move towards a bit the conclusion and summarization of our discussion, a bit on the key milestones. We of course touched a bit about the Evonik's broad goals on reduction of the scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, co-creation, of course. But if we kind of summarize it a bit on what would be the key milestones for the next decade for the Evonik, that would be great.
Yeah, it's a big question, right? So I think really our vision, this leading beyond chemistry, should guide us a little bit to improve life today and tomorrow, because that's really where we want to drive. So we want to help customers to reduce their handprint, their impact on the environment. We quantify that for a lot of our products already. And we call those products we deliver to our customers next generation solutions. And we committed ourselves, we have today 43% in our sales of those products. We want to be 2030 above 50%. And that's also in the remuneration of all board members and executives of the company. So it's also bonus relevant. So you see the importance also there. And I think that drives us where we want to go. And we haven't touched on circularity, which is also, we want to have more than 1 billion additional sales by 2030 in circularity. And here also helping our customers to increase the circular content by additives to enable mechanical recycling, chemical recycling, by more durable products, by enabling design for circularity. So the circularity, if you hopefully, we talk in 10 years, next decade, we achieve that goal. And on the other hand, really, we see a circular economy, which is way larger than today, and we are a significant enabler of that.
That's a great vision, for sure, Ralph. Maybe just, of course, it would be great to also conclude on what would be your advice to the leaders of the companies, be it in the chemical industry or maybe general advice to other companies as well, looking to accelerate this transition towards more sustainable future, more circular future.
I think there are different aspects, right? So I would say one element is definitely educate. That the entire workforce has the same language, because the sustainability is a lot of abbreviations. I had to learn that over the last 1.5 years, and makes them somehow meaningful. You know, bring it in daily life, CO2, for example. Talk about it. What does it mean? So that's educate. The other one is then having a holistic approach, right? You cannot have a separate sustainability department and they just do, it needs to be integrated in strategy, controlling, risk analysis, reporting in the business process. So it needs to be holistic. And then I would say transparency. You need transparency in data, in your priorities, in your measures, and what is important, in customer interest in that topic, and regulatory topics, which are right now, a lot are coming, or let's see how it evolves. But that transparency is needed, and then showcases, right? Have good examples to motivate. That's this topic, which is right now maybe in question in certain areas. Then also nice sustainability business cases, which are successful, bring them and make showcases so that everybody's motivated to work on the topic, which really brings me to, you know, I'm happy to lead that topic in Evonik, because you don't need really to look for volunteers. They are there, right? Sustainability people want to work for and change the future.
Yeah. And it's definitely great that you have this, not only the solutions part, sustainable solutions, and of course technologies, but also the culture that is part of your next generation agenda. So that's definitely, I guess, helps the companies also to cultivate, as you mentioned, this mindset. Wonderful. Ralf, I thank you so much for sharing your insights. And of course, it was very great to learn more about the Evonik sustainability agenda. Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you very much, and thanks for having me.